All right, the 2025 school year has kicked off. Let's look at what lies ahead for the learners, some of the challenges. We're joined now by Brahm Fleisch, Professor of Education Policy in the Division of Education, Leadership, Policy and Skills at the University of the Witwatersrand. So that's Wits University. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. I'd like us, before we talk about the year ahead, just your reflections about the National Senior Certificate pass rate for 2025. We saw, of course, how the IEB managed to achieve more than 98%, the highest percentage mark in 5 years, of course, the biggest cohort, the DBE, achieving the highest mark ever in the history of South Africa at 87.3%.
Yes, I think it was a big surprise to many of us. We weren't expecting. There's been obviously over the last 2 decades substantial improvement in our public school system, which was reflected in the matric results improvement, but it was quite unexpected to see the extent to which we saw an improvement in the past year.
And of course, the class of 24 also exposed that huge drop in the maths and science, the two subjects considered to be the key building blocks, for STEM. The Department of Basic Education obviously announcing a strategic reorientation plan for this year. Where do you think the problem lies, and how may this plan succeed in 2025? I'm talking specifically here in that drop in maths and science matriculants this year, or in the 2024 year rather.
So we saw the release of a number of important government indicators, and one of the key issues is that some of the challenges of early grade mathematics are located in the very early grades, not just in mathematics, but in reading as well. So I think that in the long term, there's a great challenge that we face in improving the quality of teaching early grade mathematics and making sure that the foundations of mathematics are well established early in the foundation phase. We know that many children get into high school and haven't really mastered the fundamentals of the 4 operations. They certainly don't understand some of the underlying principles of mathematics. So while there is obviously pressure to improve the matric results next year, I think the real emphasis needs to be on really addressing the underlying challenge that we face.
Especially when you look at these numbers, Prof, and I just want to remind our viewers in terms of what the Minister said. She expressed concern over the significant 12,338 drop, of course, in the number of candidates who registered for mathematics at 255,762 in 2024. That's compared to 268,000 students enrolled for the subject in 23. And of course, the same goes with physical science, a slight decrease there. So there is concern there, certainly. But let's look at now another issue that is, again, playing itself out in most of the schools in the country. In as far as school placement is concerned, I mean, this seems to be a problem across the board, and we have seen it more acutely in Gauteng and the Western Cape. With the start of the new year, this continues to be a problem, Prof.
So the problem essentially stems from really significant shifts in where people are choosing to live. There's been a decline in enrollment in many of our rural schools, particularly in the Eastern Cape. People are deciding to move to urban centres where job prospects, although they're not great, are certainly better than in rural Eastern Cape. So the challenge is essentially we're needing to adjust to a fundamental shift in the level of urban dwellers, the declining enrollments in rural schools, and that's an inevitable process. So we shouldn't be surprised at the beginning of every year that there's pressure on our urban schools, particularly in the Western Cape, Cape Town in particular, and Johannesburg and the more generally in Gauteng. And it follows a broader trend, an urbanization trend in South Africa.
I want us now to weigh in on what we can expect this year with regards to the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, the Bella Act, which was recently signed into law. Official, government policy. It makes a number of changes to the country's education system. One of the concerns, of course, is how it will be implemented and funded. There was also talk of the establishment of norms, standards and policies for the relevant regulations that now need to be drafted. What are we looking at this year? What are we likely to expect?
So obviously the first and most important issue is that the National Department needs to develop regulations and make sure that those regulations are implemented. Within the regulations, there are a range of different areas that are likely to have substantial impact on the schools. Obviously, the making grade R compulsory may put greater pressure on the school systems because there may be a larger number of children moving from the private to public schools for the grade R year. And that may not necessarily affect us immediately at the beginning of the year, but certainly towards the end of the year and next year, that may have a real impact on the schools. Obviously, everybody's been focused on Section 4 and 5. I'm less concerned about that. I don't think it's going to affect large numbers of schools, and there are significant due process procedures that need to be followed. So if there would be changes in admissions policy in individual schools or language policies, that will likely to take more time, and we won't really see that impact immediately. There are other aspects of Bella that are likely to come into effect this year. For example, there's an expanded definition of corporal punishment. Teachers are going to be much more wary of the kind of punishment that they use on learners, because the expanded definition is obviously going to impact them probably this year. So that's something that hasn't been discussed extensively, but I think might become an issue as we proceed across the year. There are other issues that are not necessarily going to affect schools, but will receive some attention. There are provisions for oversight of homeschooling. I know that many of the homeschooling advocates have been expressing concerns about that. There's obviously the department has greater oversight of homeschooling. So these are all issues that are likely to surface during the 2025 academic year.
Prof, thank you so much for that, of course, just giving us a sense of what we can then expect in the 2025 school year. Professor Brahm Fleisch there for us, Professor of Education Policy in the Division of Education, Leadership, Policy and Skills at Wits University.